Picture this. It's the final days of World War II, and deep beneath the Austrian Alps, Nazi scientists are racing against time to perfect a machine so revolutionary, so incomprehensibly powerful that its very existence could have changed the course of human history, a device the world has come to know as Die Glocke, the bell. For decades, this mysterious artifact remained shrouded in secrecy, relegated to the dusty corners of conspiracy theories and fringe documentaries, until historians and researchers began asking a question that refused to go away. What if it was real? And what if it represented an energy source so advanced that governments around the world have spent the better part of a century trying to keep it hidden? Welcome to a deep dive into one of history's most captivating mysteries, where science fiction bleeds into historical fact, where the line between legend and reality becomes dangerously blurred, and where the pursuit of unlimited power might have cost humanity more than we'll ever know. I'm your guide through the labyrinthine corridors of this enigma. And trust me when I say what we're about to uncover together will challenge everything you thought you knew about Nazi Germany's final technological push and the lengths to which world governments have gone to suppress certain truths. Our story begins not in the sterile halls of a laboratory, but in the hearts and minds of desperate men facing imminent defeat, driven by an ideology that valued technological supremacy above all else, and powered by a scientific community that was willing to venture into the darkest corners of experimentation to serve their regime. By the time World War II was entering its death throes in 1944 and 1945, Nazi Germany had already produced technological marvels that seemed impossible for their time. Jet aircraft, ballistic missiles, advanced submarines, and weapons systems that pushed the boundaries of conventional physics and engineering. But according to historical records, declassified documents, and the testimony of former Nazi scientists who survived the war, there was one project that transcended all others in its ambition and its potential, a project so classified that even many high ranking Nazi officials were kept in the dark about its true nature and purpose. This project had a code name, a simple German word that would echo through the decades to come: Die Glocke, or in English, the bell. The appearance of this device, according to those who claim to have witnessed it, was deceptively simple: a metallic bell-shaped structure approximately 9 to 15 feet in height, constructed from an unknown metallic alloy that reportedly could withstand extraordinary temperatures and stresses. But the simplicity of its appearance masked an interior of staggering complexity, a labyrinth of mechanisms, crystalline structures, and electromagnetic coils arranged in patterns that seemed to defy conventional engineering logic. At its core, according to various accounts, was a substance or technology that could harness and manipulate electromagnetic fields in ways that modern physics even today struggles to explain. The scientists involved in the project, including figures like SS General Hans Kammler, SS Officer Walter Gerlach, and potentially even Werner von Braun himself, were allegedly working on what could only be described as a revolutionary energy generation system, one that could theoretically provide unlimited power by tapping into fundamental forces of the universe that mainstream science hadn't even begun to properly understand. Now, before we venture deeper into this mystery, we must acknowledge the elephant in the room. Much of what we know about Die Glocke comes from fragmentary sources, survivor testimonies that sometimes contradict each other, and documents whose authenticity has been hotly debated by historians and academics. The post war world was chaotic. Displaced persons were everywhere, memories were often traumatized and unreliable, and the geopolitical landscape was such that certain information was quickly classified and hidden away from public scrutiny. The Soviet Union captured extensive records of Nazi scientific research, as did the Allied powers. Yet much of this information remains classified to this day, which only fuels speculation about what might have been deemed too dangerous or too revolutionary to release to the general public. But here's what we do know with reasonable historical certainty. Nazi Germany was genuinely pursuing advanced energy technologies. The SS did establish a secretive research facility in Lower Silesia near the town of Wenceslas, and scientists of remarkable caliber were indeed working on projects so classified that their very existence was denied for years after the war. The testimonies that do exist paint a picture of a machine that was never meant for conventional warfare, despite Nazi aspirations to develop superweapons that could turn the tide of battle. Instead, Die Glocke appears to have been something far more ambitious and far more dangerous, an attempt to unlock the fundamental forces of energy itself, to create a device that could generate power on a scale that would make fossil fuels and nuclear energy look like primitive candles in the darkness. According to Igor Witkowski, a Polish journalist who conducted extensive research into Die Glocke based on interviews with former Nazi scientists, the device operated on principles that involved the manipulation of exotic matter and the generation of artificial gravitational fields. The mechanism allegedly worked by creating rotating electromagnetic fields of such intensity that they could affect the very fabric of space-time around them, essentially tapping into what theoretical physicists today might refer to as zero point energy, the quantum vacuum fluctuations that some scientists believe could theoretically provide an inexhaustible source of energy. If such a device could be made to work, the implications would be staggering. Unlimited clean energy, the potential for anti-gravity technology, the possibility of manipulating gravitational fields for transportation and power generation, essentially the key to unlocking technologies that would make our current civilization look medieval by comparison. But here's where the narrative takes a darker turn. Because, according to testimony and fragmentary records, Die Glocke wasn't just a theoretical exercise or a pipe dream of Nazi scientists desperate to salvage their regime. There are accounts suggesting that the device was actually tested, that it was activated, and that the results were catastrophic enough that the project was immediately suspended and the entire facility was systematically destroyed to prevent the Allies or the Soviets from capturing the technology. One of the most chilling accounts comes from Witkowski's research based on interviews with people who claimed direct knowledge of the project. According to these testimonies, an experiment with Die Glocke resulted in what was essentially a localized environmental disaster, a phenomenon that caused severe damage to the test facility, killed or severely injured everyone in the vicinity, and left behind radiation and contamination that persisted for years afterward. The description of this incident bears disturbing similarities to accounts of radiation sickness and environmental damage, suggesting that whatever energy was being manipulated within Die Glocke was far more powerful and volatile than even the scientists orchestrating the experiments had anticipated. In the final days of the war, as Soviet and American forces closed in from opposite directions, those responsible for the project made a decision that would echo through history. The facility was destroyed, the research was scattered, and the surviving scientists were dispersed in different directions, some captured by the Soviets, others by the Western Allies, and some disappearing entirely into the fog of post-war chaos and displacement. This fragmentation of knowledge became the perfect incubator for decades of speculation, conspiracy theories, and conflicting narratives about what Die Glocke really was and what became of it in the post-war world. Now, let's talk about the geopolitical implications, because this is where the story becomes not just a historical curiosity, but a matter of genuine concern for understanding the post-war world order. Immediately after the war, both the Soviet Union and the Western Allies engaged in what has been called Operation Paperclip and its Soviet equivalent, a systematic effort to capture Nazi scientists, research, and technology before the other side could get to it. Hundreds of scientists, engineers, and researchers were essentially kidnapped, blackmailed, or convinced to work for their respective captors, and vast quantities of research materials, blueprints, and prototypes were seized and spirited away to secure locations for further study. The question that haunts historians and researchers is this: in the scramble to capture Nazi technological secrets, did someone, the Americans, the Soviets, or perhaps another power entirely, succeed in capturing Die Glocke, or at least crucial elements of its design and operational principles? And if so, what happened to this technology in the decades that followed? The evidence, such as it is, suggests intriguing possibilities. Declassified documents from various sources mention anomalous energy phenomena being studied at classified facilities in both the Soviet Union and the United States during the Cold War era. Projects with names like Soviet Wonder Weapons and various American black budget initiatives hint at research into exotic energy sources. and unusual physics that don't align with publicly acknowledged scientific programs. There are also accounts from various scientists and engineers who worked in classified American military and intelligence facilities that mention encountering technology or research data that seem decades ahead of published scientific understanding, technology that they were warned never to discuss or acknowledge even decades after their retirement. The most provocative theory, and one that must be stated clearly as pure speculation, is that Die Glocke or its principles were indeed captured, that the technology was deemed so potentially destabilizing that both superpowers agreed to keep it secret, and that fragments of its design were incorporated into various classified military and space programs throughout the Cold War and beyond. This theory would explain why certain technological advances seem to leap ahead unexpectedly in specific fields, why American space technology made such dramatic bounds in the 1960s, why certain theoretical predictions about propulsion systems were pursued in classified programs, why the government has been so secretive about certain areas of research even as public science moved in different directions. But let's examine this from a different angle, because any honest assessment of Die Glocke must acknowledge the alternative explanations, the skeptical perspective, and the reasons why mainstream science has been extremely reluctant to embrace the Die Glocke narrative. From a rigorous scientific standpoint, many of the claims about Die Glocke's capabilities violate our current understanding of physics and energy conservation. A device that could generate unlimited energy would represent a violation of the second law of thermodynamics, which is one of the most fundamental and well tested laws in all of science. While it's true that theoretical physics has proposed concepts like zero point energy that might someday circumvent this law, we have no current experimental evidence that such circumvention is possible, and the mathematics required to make it work remains deeply speculative and controversial even among theoretical physicists. Furthermore, from a historical perspective, Nazi Germany was desperately searching for superweapons right up to the end of the war, which suggests they didn't possess any technology that was genuinely revolutionary in the way Die Glocke proponents claim. If they had access to unlimited energy or anti-gravity technology, why didn't they use it to turn the tide of battle? This remains one of the most compelling arguments against the Die Glocke narrative. If the technology worked, its absence from the battlefields of 1944 and 1945 suggests either that it didn't work, that it was still in too early a stage of development to be weaponized, or that it represented a fundamentally different kind of technology that couldn't be directly translated into military advantage. Skeptical scientists and historians also point out that much of the testimony about Die Glocke is second-hand, filtered through multiple retellings, potentially contaminated by the desires and biases of those who reported it, and in some cases, openly acknowledged as coming from sources whose credibility is questionable. Some of the key figures in the Die Glocke narrative have been shown to have exaggerated or fabricated claims about other aspects of their experience, which raises legitimate questions about the reliability of their accounts regarding Die Glocke. The documentation that supposedly proves the existence of the project is fragmented, often lacks clear provenance, and can be interpreted in multiple ways by different researchers. Where genuine Nazi documents mention exotic research or unusual energy phenomena, they often remain frustratingly ambiguous about what was actually being developed and whether it reached any stage of practical functionality. And yet, the mystery persists, because there are threads within the official historical record that cannot be easily dismissed. Nazi Germany genuinely did employ some of the world's greatest physicists and engineers, many of whom survived the war and went on to distinguished careers in the post-war scientific establishment. When interviewed, several of these individuals made cryptic comments about research they had worked on that they were forbidden to discuss, research that went beyond the publicly acknowledged Nazi weapons programs. Declassified documents from various governments mention research into exotic propulsion, unusual electromagnetic phenomena, and non-conventional energy generation in ways that suggest genuine interest and investment in pursuing technologies that go beyond conventional science. The timing of certain technological leaps in both the Soviet and American space programs correlates suspiciously with the post-war recruitment of Nazi scientists and engineers, suggesting that perhaps some of the theoretical or practical knowledge brought by these scientists did indeed accelerate technological development in ways that conventional history doesn't fully account for. And perhaps most intriguingly, the extreme secrecy that has surrounded certain classified military and intelligence programs maintained decades after the end of the Cold War suggests that something about these research areas remains sufficiently sensitive that governments are unwilling to declassify the information even when there would seem to be little national security justification for maintaining secrecy. This raises the question, if Die Glocke was merely the product of Nazi pipe dreams and wishful thinking, why would post war governments consider it sensitive enough to classify for 70 years or more? So, where does this leave us? The truth about Die Glocke likely lies somewhere in the murky territory between absolute fiction and proven fact. What seems most probable, based on the available evidence and the logic of historical development, is something like this. Nazi scientists were genuinely exploring theoretical physics and engineering principles that were ahead of their time, perhaps drawing on ideas from figures like Nikola Tesla or other fringe scientific thinkers whose work Nazi Germany took more seriously than the Western scientific establishment. They may have constructed a device based on these principles that demonstrated some unusual properties, perhaps genuine electromagnetic effects that seem to defy conventional explanation, or perhaps misunderstood or misinterpreted phenomena that appeared more significant than they actually were. The project likely never reached a stage where it could be weaponized or industrialized, and the experiments conducted on it may have gone wrong in dramatic and destructive ways, leading to its abandonment and the destruction of records. The post-war power struggle between superpowers created conditions where any technology, no matter how speculative or impractical, became something to be captured, secured, and studied in the deepest secrecy. The legend grew over decades as fragments of testimony, classified programs, and genuine scientific advances in unrelated fields were woven together into an increasingly elaborate narrative. And perhaps most significantly, the Die Glocke legend serves a profound psychological function in our contemporary world. It represents the possibility that the rules as we understand them can be broken, that hidden truths might transform our understanding of reality, and that power on an almost unimaginable scale might exist just beyond the veil of official narrative. The dream of unlimited energy has haunted human civilization for centuries, from the alchemist's search for the philosopher's stone to Tesla's ideas about wireless power transmission to the modern pursuit of fusion energy and renewable sources. Die Glocke represents this eternal human aspiration, dressed in historical garments and validated by the aura of Nazi-era scientific genius. But the Die Glocke story also serves as a cautionary tale about the dangers of secret research, about the ways in which the pursuit of unlimited power can lead to environmental and human catastrophe, and about the importance of transparency and democratic oversight in scientific research. Whether Die Glocke was real or legendary, its implications are profound and worth taking seriously. If there is even a possibility that breakthroughs in energy physics exist but are being suppressed or kept secret by governments and military institutions, then democratic societies have a fundamental interest in bringing such research into the light, in subjecting it to peer review and public scrutiny, and in ensuring that technologies of such magnitude are never again developed in secret by unaccountable state apparatus. The alternative, a world where revolutionary technologies are developed in black budget programs and kept from public knowledge, is a world where we surrender our agency as citizens and our ability to make informed decisions about the future we want to inhabit. The Die Glocke mystery in the end is less about whether one particular Nazi device worked or didn't work, and more about fundamental questions of power, secrecy, scientific progress, and the kind of civilization we want to be. Do we want to live in a world where transformative technologies are developed in darkness by military and intelligence agencies, or in a world where scientific progress is transparent, accountable, and conducted in service of humanity as a whole? The story of Die Glocke reminds us that the answer to that question matters, perhaps more than we realize. So, what did you think of this dive into one of history's most captivating mysteries? Do you think Die Glocke was a real technology or merely a legend born from fragments of testimony and wishful thinking? Did the Nazis really develop a machine that could unlock unlimited energy, Or is this the ultimate historical hoax? I genuinely love to hear your thoughts on this. So please leave your theories, your evidence, your arguments, and your counter arguments in the comments section below. This conversation doesn't end here with me, it continues with you. The community of people who care about truth, who care about history, who are willing to question official narratives while also remaining committed to evidence and rigorous thinking. If this video sparked your curiosity about hidden history, about the science that might be lurking in classified archives, or about the untold stories of World War II's final scientific push, please consider subscribing to this channel so you don't miss future explorations into the mysteries that official history would rather leave buried. Hit that notification bell so you're alerted whenever new content drops. And if you enjoyed this deep dive into Die Glocke, please give this video a like. It helps the algorithm. It tells YouTube that people are interested in this kind of substantive historical analysis, and it supports the work we do to bring these stories to light. Thank you so much for joining me on this journey through one of the darkest and most intriguing corners of 20th century history, and I'll see you in the next video, where we'll be exploring another mystery that sits at the intersection of history, science, and the unknown. Until then, keep questioning, keep seeking truth, and remember, sometimes the most important stories are the ones that nobody wants to tell you.